Fun with failure.
So, this happened about a month ago, and I'm still realizing the enormity of this frack up. This frack up started with me going on a business trip for a week. I had finished my work a day earlier, and my flight couldn't be moved by my boss, so I could use that day as I liked, as I had worked late into the night the past 3 days. So, I looked on the website Meetup for things that you could do, and found a group doing paintballing. Oh, good stuff. I joined and had a brilliant 7 hours, accumulating many bruises. After a 7-hour flight and an hour drive, I get home late morning to find that my wife is getting ready to leave for a week due to a last-minute conference. There was less than 15 minutes between me getting home and her leaving, so there was no time to talk. Now here's where the frack up ramps up. On the day that my wife is due home, I go for a morning run, but what I didn't know was that my wife returned home seconds after I've left and had seen me leaving. Halfway around, I started feeling bad, but tried to push through the pain. Moments later, I fainted and hit the ground. My wife, who knew my route, had thrown on some slacks and followed me, only to see me on the ground. Then she called an ambulance and we were off to the hospital. After an initial assessment, they asked my wife where the bruises came from. She had no clue. Apparently, this is a red flag for domestic abuse. It took 2 hours until I was coherent enough to clarify that I went paintballing. And all the while, my wife was being questioned why I was so bruised. My wife and the nurse were surprised by my statement, and I didn't think the nurse believed me. After 40 hours in the hospital, I was released and sent home. 2 days later, we had a PCSO visit because of a loud shouting in the apartment building. And finally, this morning, we woke up to find our apartment had been broken into and trashed. We just moved in and there was nothing of value outside our bedroom. How we didn't hear them, we don't know. The problem is that when we called the police, they split me and my wife and interrogated us, asking me questions about our relationship. After all these encounters, we think that the powers to be thinks my wife beats me. This happened when I was 13 or 14 years old. At the time, I was really into Futurama. As a matter of fact, it's still one of my favorite shows. And this was back when Adult Swim ran reruns of it almost every night. At that age, I understood most of the obvious jokes on the show, but there were a lot that I didn't get or only kind of got. My mistake back then was trusting my dad and his word. One time when watching the show, Bender was tasked with making a birthday cake for Leela. And Leela tells him, if anyone's going to jump out of the cake, make sure you cook it before they get in. At that time, I didn't know what jumping out of a cake really meant. And I didn't know that strippers usually are the ones who do. I just thought the idea of jumping out of a cake was really funny. One day when we were at a birthday party for one of my sister's friends, it is where they invited all the siblings. My dad and I were sitting at one table. I innocently said something along the lines of, "Say, wouldn't it be funny if someone jumped out of the cake?" To which my dad replied something along the lines, "Yeah, that would be funny. You might want to ask your mom about that. She used to do it all the time when she was younger." Later during the party when I was sitting with Mom, and I think she was chatting with one of the other parents there, when I had the chance, I said something like, "Hey Mom, Dad said you used to jump out of cakes. When did you do that?" My mom, of course, freaked out, and soon enough, my dad had to explain to her that he tricked me. He then proceeded to explain what jumping out of a cake meant. And also, no, my mom was not a stripper. My dad was just messing with me. For a bit of context, I work at a chemical plant that processes various products, which usually include hazardous materials as ingredients. A good majority of my time in the plant area involves wearing a full face respirator to protect me from the organic and acid gases, as well as my eye protection from the splashes. I'm also not really scared of spiders. It's time to add the liquid acid, the most crucial step in the whole process, to the reactor. So I pick up my respirator, put it on, then get lifted up to the man lift to pour the acid in. The moment I start tipping the bucket and liquid starts pouring out, I feel a little tickle on my upper lip. I don't think much of it until I exhale from my nose. Next, I feel a scamper come across my upper lip. I didn't panic since I was holding about 4 gallons of extremely corrosive acid. I also couldn't hurry up since it required steps to slowly add the acid into the batch. 16 kilograms in 20 seconds. I was hoping to wait it out, but the spider was apparently mad at me for deciding to bite my lip. I thought I could get rid of the spider by exhaling hard, but I felt the spider coming back after twice. At this point I've got about 8 seconds left in the pour, so I thought that I had a cool story to tell and not have to worry about it if I just ate the spider. I wasn't too excited about tasting it, so I quickly sucked it in, washed it against my roof of my mouth, and swallowed it as fast as possible. The only thing was that it wasn't a skimpy spider, it was a fat juicy one, and I don't have any tolerance for bad textures in my mouth. No amount of swallowing speed could wash away the bad taste in time. I began to succumb to the slimy and horrid texture and gagged once before throwing up. It first filled up my mouth area, under my lower lip to the bridge of my nose, before shooting down out of the exhaust flap. It flowed out halfway down my apron, not me, whew, and half of it went straight into the reactor I was leaning over while pouring. At this point I knew I fracked up. The bright side though was I couldn't taste the spider anymore. I had to leave and have my coworker clean up and put it all in the hazardous waste tote. I ruined the whole batch, which would have been over 1,000 kilograms of product. We could sell that for $63,000. Right now I just finished my part of the cleanup and talking to the boss. It doesn't sound like I'm gonna get fired, but I definitely owe the company compensation in one way or another. Haven't had time to go through things completely, but I'm in over my head here. I went grocery shopping recently, while not being altogether sure as to the course of action being wise. You see, the previous evening, I had prepared and consumed a massive quantity of my patented, you definitely are going to have some stomach problems, chili. Tasty stuff, albeit hot to the point of being painful, which comes with a written guarantee from me that if you eat it, the next day both of your butt cheeks will fall off. Here's the thing. I had awoken that morning, and even after 2 cups of coffee, and all of you know what I mean, nothing happened. No Watson's movement number 2. Despite habanero peppers swimming their way through my intestinal tract, I appeared to be unable to create the usual morning symphony, referred to by my next door neighbors as thunder and lightning. Knowing that a time of reckoning had to come, not sure as to when, I bravely set off to the market. One of the local Walmart grocery stores is where I usually hunt for the tasty tidbits. Upon entering the store at first, all seemed normal. I selected a cart and began pushing it around, and selecting items and putting them in the cart. It wasn't until I was on the opposite end of the store, from the restrooms, that it hit me. Oh, don't look at me like you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm referring to that uh-oh, gotta go pain that seems to always get you at the wrong time. The thing is, this pain was different. The habaneros and the chili from the night before was staging a revolt. In the mad rush for freedom, they bullied their way through my small intestines, forcing their way into the large intestines. And before I could take one step in the direction of the restrooms, which would bring me sweet relief, it happened. The peppers fired a warning shot. There I stood, alone in the spice and baking aisle, suddenly enveloped in a noxious cloud, the likes of which has never before been recorded. I was afraid to move for fear that more of that odor would escape me. Slowly, oh so slowly, the pressure seemed to leave the lower part of my body, and I began to move up the aisle and out of it, just as an elderly old woman turned onto it. I don't know what made me do it, but I stopped to see what her reaction would be to that malodorous cloud that refused to dissipate. Have you ever been torn in 2 different directions emotionally? Here's what I mean. I could have warned the poor woman about it, but didn't. I simply watched as she walked into the invisible and apparently indestructible wall of odor so terrible that all she could do before gathering her senses and running was to stand there blinking and waving her arms about her as though she was trying to ward off angry bees. This, of course, made me feel terrible, but then made me laugh. Mistake. Here's the thing, when you laugh, it's hard to keep things clamped down, if you know what I mean. With each new guffaw, an explosion issued forth from my nether region. Some were so loud that it echoed, and I was later told that a few folks on the other aisles had ducked, fearing that someone was robbing the store and fired a shotgun. Suddenly things were no longer funny. It was coming. I raced off through the store toward the bathroom, laying down a cloud all the way, praying that I'd make it before the grand mall of rectal explosions took place. Luck was on my side. Just in the nick of time I got to the John, beginning the inevitable oh my god. I floated above the toilet seat because my butt was burning so bad while purging this demonic fluid. One poor fellow walked in while I was in the middle of what is the true meaning of shock and awe. He made a gagging sound and disgustedly said, "Oh dear God!" and quickly left. Once finished, I left the restroom, reacquiring my partially filled cart, intending to carry on my shopping, when a store employee approached me and said, "Sir, you might want to step outside for a few minutes. It appears that some prankster set off a stink bomb in the middle of the store. The manager is going to run the vent on high for a few minutes to get rid of the smell." That, of course, set me off again. I started laughing, causing residual gases to escape me. The employee took one sniff, jumped back, pulling his shirt up over his nose, pointing at me in an accusing manner. "It's you!" Then he ran off, returning moments later with the manager. I was unceremoniously escorted from the premises and asked none too kindly not to return.